Just imagine you've had to leave home. It's dark. You're cold. You're frightened. You've no money, no food, nowhere to stay. How would you feel if you had to spend just one night on the streets like this, especially last night? Oh, and by the way, you're only 12 years old. Just think of a 12-year-old child that you know. Picture their innocence. Well, this couldn't possibly happen to one so young and vulnerable, could it? But this is a true story of Tom, who had a happy childhood until he was 10 years old when his mother sadly died. As a result, his father started to drink heavily and to take his anger and frustrations out on Tom. Needless to say, Tom became very unhappy and insecure and kept getting into trouble at school. And this made his father even angrier. One evening, his father really lost his temper with him and threw his dinner at him. Tom rushed up to his room in tears, feeling so scared that he knew that he had to get away from his father and that house, which used to be his secure home. So while his dad was watching TV, Tom quietly packed a bag and left in darkness. Well, surely this is an isolated incident, isn't it? A pretty rare story. Have you all seen the TV program Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Yes? It's hosted by Chris Tarrant. Well, I was hoping that we would have a Chris and a Tarrant today. But Tarrant is having a well-earned break for a few days, so you'll have to put up with just Chris. But here's the question for you all. How many children do you think under the age of 16 ran away from home last year? Was it A, 1,000, B, 10,000, C, 49,000, or D, 100,000? And you can't phone a friend. Okay, A, hands up how many of you think that 1,000 children ran away from home last year? What about 10,000? Few hands. 49,000? Yeah, even more hands. 100,000? Just a few. Believe it or not, 100,000 children under 16 run away from home or from care each year. Many of them, like Tom, to escape from family conflict, violence or abuse. A quarter of these runaways will end up sleeping in unsafe places, such as back alleys, parks, bus shelters, putting themselves at serious risk of harm. I'm sure you'll agree that these are shocking statistics, and you may be wondering what could drive a child to choose a life on the streets. Well, you've heard about Tom. Let me tell you about Emma. She was at breaking point when she ran away because she'd been caring for both her parents, who were substance users, and she'd reached a point where it was all too much for her to take, and she had to get away. She went to the local park and sat on a bench there, feeling scared, emotional, and alone as the world walked by, oblivious to her predicament. She didn't realize that she was an easy target for people who wanted to harm her. A friendly young man came and started talking to her, sympathizing with her, and offered her a drink. She accepted because she was too scared to refuse. During the following hours, she blacked out. And later on, the Children's Society discovered that she'd been the victim of a personal assault. How did the society help? A project worker got to know Emma and established a relationship based on trust. It was then that she began to open up and share her problems. They discovered the disturbing reality of her home situation and the neglect and pressure to which Emma had been subjected. And the reason that she'd persisted at home for so long, that she feared that had she left home, her younger sister would have been put into care. So the society began to work with local health services to provide support for her parents and to lift Emma's burden of care. And this support contrived to give Emma and her sister a better life. With the support of the Children's Society, Emma's story ended relatively happily, as did Tom's, as he too was put in touch with a society project worker who managed to gain his trust and looked after him in temporary accommodation until he went to live with a kindly aunt. There are, however, sadly, many children on the streets who need our help today. The Society is working hard to ensure that no child has to face a night alone and in danger on the streets. But sadly, 3 out of 4 children don't seek help because they don't know where to turn or feel there's no one they can trust. And even sadder is the fact that the average age of young runaways is decreasing, and the Society increasingly supports children aged 11 and 12. And it has to be said that in recent years, the use of mobile phones and social networking sites such as Facebook has made vulnerable children easier targets for the ungodly. So the Society increasingly finds itself working with young runaways like Emma and Tom, who are at serious risk of exploitation. Now, when a child like Emma or Tom comes into touch with the Society, it gives them their own dedicated project worker who provides them with someone who listens to them, sees things from their perspective, and tries to place them back in a secure family environment, if at all possible. In short, the Society exists to stop harm, to fight unfairness, and transform the lives of the most disadvantaged children. And although the world has changed much since the Society was founded 130 years ago, its aims and concerns remain the same. A bit about the history. In the late 19th century, Edward Rudolph was a young Sunday school teacher who one Sunday, like a shepherd who's lost his sheep, went looking for 2 boys who'd failed to turn up for Sunday school. He was shocked to find them begging for food. Their father had died, leaving their mother struggling to bring up 7 children under the age of 11. But they weren't the only families living in such conditions, and Rudolph was moved to act. So the Church of England Central House for Waifs and Strays was established in 1881, and it was the first children's home to mimic the traditional family structure home rather than the 100-bed type homes commonplace at that time. And with support from parishes around the country, by 1919 Rudolph had set up 113 such caring children's homes throughout England and Wales. These days, the Society no longer runs children's homes, but focuses instead on helping children directly in the community and influencing public attitudes and policy. Only last week, you may have heard in the news that it was the Children's Society that brought to the public's attention that under the proposed plans to reduce benefits, that the children of those affected will lose their rights to free school meals. And in July last year, the Society launched its Make Runaways Safe campaign, the aim of which is to ensure that runaways have access to the support they so desperately need, to make their safety a priority for every local authority and police force, which means lobbying government, schools and the police. And at the end of last year, the government published a new strategy on missing children and adults. Working with runaways, however, is only part of the Society's work. It supports other vulnerable children, such as the 65,000 now actually in care. And the Society also supports young carers, and Tanya is one such. For the last 11 years, she's cared for her mother, who is an alcoholic and suffers with depression. And if that's not enough, she has a younger brother to care for too. Aged 14, Tanya would wake up with, as she described it, a head full of anger. She'd have to get her younger brother ready for school before getting herself sorted. And whilst at school, she'd not only worry about how her little brother was getting on, but she'd also be wondering, is Mum going to be all right while I'm at school and not do anything silly? The reason, when she came home from school, she would often find her mum drunk. So every night she would make sure her mother was okay and that there was no more drink in the house. Then she had to make sure her brother was fed, washed and tucked up in bed. And that was before she started the housework or even thought about homework. Unsurprisingly, with so many other things to do, Tanya began to wonder why she bothered with school. So she simply stopped going. How did the society help? Well, Tanya was put in touch with the society's Young Carers Forum, which gave her an outlet to express her anxieties with other young people in similar circumstances. And the society worked with her to give extra support, such as one-to-one tuition. She now attends college and has been helped to organise her life to such an extent that she even gives talks at school assemblies to let other young carers know that there is support out there. Well, now you may be wondering where you come in. Well, it would be quite wrong of me to consider asking you for anything without first thanking you on behalf of the society for the support that you've been kindly and generously giving during the last 25 years during which this church has been associated. Last year, for example, you gave over £1,100, most of which was gift aided, which added another over £250, making a total of at least £1,350. And at this stage, on behalf of the Society, I'd like to thank Fred Tomlin for the work that he has done for 11 years as box secretary on behalf of this church in helping to raise this money. I said at least £1,350 because a number of you kindly make payments direct to the Society, the substance of which we are unaware, and that's absolutely fine. In addition, the Missionary Committee voted £200 to the Society from the proceeds of the bazaar. And thanks to the help of supporters like you, the Society is making a real difference to the lives of vulnerable young people. Firstly, by helping to identify and solve the underlying problems faced by young runaways. Secondly, by giving support to children who find themselves as carers for other family members. Thirdly, and I haven't had time to mention these next two, by providing disabled children with opportunities to take part in activities they would not otherwise be able to do. Fourthly, by providing hands-on support to destitute families in its children's centres. And lastly, by simply giving children a voice in society. And here's the punchline. If you don't already give to the Society and would like to do so, we've given you a form, the back of which you can simply complete the top part and return it to Fred or Anne. Fred, if you'd like to raise your hand so everybody knows who you are. Or to me, and we will forward it on to the Society, who will then contact you about the way in which you'd like to give, either by having a box like this, which I put my 5p's in. It's amazing how much you can make in 5p's over a year, between 25 and 40 pounds, I reckon. Or alternatively, you can give direct to the Society, whichever you prefer. And alternatively also, there will be a retiring collection as you leave the church. And you can put your completed form in there if you prefer. But if you do decide to give, and I know it's difficult these days, but if you do decide to give in whichever way, on behalf of the Society, may I thank you most sincerely for your contribution to this most valuable work. And I should add 80% of which goes into direct frontline project work. A few weeks ago, when Ian was looking at the readings for April, he asked me if I would like to have particular readings appropriate for today's theme. But when I looked up the appointed lectionary readings, I don't think I could have chosen any more suitable. We've heard that the Good Shepherd is prepared to seek the lost sheep, and if necessary, to lay down his life for them. And at Eastertide, we are conscious that Jesus, the most definitive Good Shepherd that ever walked the earth, laid down his life for his sheep, for God's children, for us. God does not call us literally to give up our lives as Jesus did, but doesn't he call us to give of our time and of our resources to today's lost sheep among his children? So on behalf of the Children's Society, may I thank you again for what you've given in the past. And may I, on behalf of kids like Tom, Emma, and Tanya, humbly ask you if you would consider being a good shepherd to them in the future. Thank you.